Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to another Skits Tut. This is kind of part 2 to the last video. This time we are going to be going over the player health and the player's life and how he can die, and we'll send him to a death scene. So for this particular video, you're going to want to make sure you save all your information with the save and save project. Then I want you to start a new scene, and I named mine Death. So that's what's going to happen when the player dies. It's going to go to a death scene, kind of like game over, would you like to continue, or would you like to quit? So we'll give a couple options. Now, that'll be the next video for the death scene, but for now, you're going to want that. When you click to your death scene, I'm going to want you to go to the build settings, and you can just add the death scene in after your level. So that way we're going to reference it by its name itself rather than its integer, because as the levels keep going, then we're not going to want it to just go to the next thing. So we want it to specifically go to that scene. That's all you really need to know about that. So as you see here, I have the canvas set up, and I have the player two canvases that I created by just create UI canvas, and I named this one player health, and I duplicated it and I named it player life. So then I right clicked and I created a UI image, and this is the health bar BG, and this is going to work exactly the same way that the enemy health bar did with overlaying. It's the same exact thing, to where I put another image in there. And something I did not cover on the health bar is the empty. I actually made this a mask, and as what that does is it prevents any of the filler stuff, anything that's inside of the empty as a child, it will never spill over. If the image is too big or whatever, it'll always fit perfectly inside. So it just masks basically. And to get this effect, just go to add component, and then you type mask in, and it's this mask right here at the top. And once you've added that, that's all you need to do. It's done. So if you didn't do that for your enemy health bar, if you've been following along the tutorial, then just simply go back to the enemy, back to the enemy object, and back to the health bar canvas. Inside of the BG is the BG empty, and when you look at it, you will see that mine also has the mask on it here. Now I did set up the anchors, if you notice, the same way that I did for the other bar. So you're going to want to do that as you go. And then I did the same thing. I got red, yellow, and green, and I put the images in there. I set the image to filled, and I did horizontal left, and then I just duplicated the same way I did the other one, and put the name, changed the names, and put the according images on there. And that's all you really have to do to set that up. And it's the same exact process for the life bar. I just added everything in there that I needed, and I named them exactly what colors they're gonna be. So for this, dark red would be the low, and the light blue is gonna be the yellow. You know what I'm saying? Instead of just doing them all the same color, I switched it up to light blue. And then dark blue, which you're seeing here, is the full bar. So that's the only thing different about those two bars. Now let's go ahead and take a look. Oh yeah, before we go into it any deeper, these are both screen space overlays. So they're not going to be world space. These are actually going to overlay the camera like you're seeing in the scene in the game view over here. And now we're ready to look at the code. We'll start with the health bar. The only thing that we need namespace wise is Unity Engine, and we need the UI. Of course, we got the filler images for the red, the yellow, and the green. And when the player wants to respawn, when he has lives left, and we're just going to respawn them back to the respawn zone. So let me show you what I did for that. So this purple diamond right here is actually just a empty game object that I created, and I added a gizmo so we can make it visible. So it's just by clicking this, and then you can see I went with the purple. You can use whatever color you want. That's just my preference for now, you know. So this is where the player is actually going to respawn back to. No matter where he is, he'll pop back here when he dies, as long as he has more than 0 lives. Of course, this is a transform because we're only getting the position of that respawn zone. And then we need to know what our player is. So this is the game object. This is how we're going to respawn them back to that respawn zone. I hard-coded the information for the health and the max player health. And if you notice, they're static floating point variables, because what happens when you level up, or if you get a power up or something and you get more max health, you know, we want to be able to update that. And we also, if we get an item, we're going to want to be able to boost our health or anything. So I chose to make this a static variable, and then I made this public static boolean for player respawn. So basically, if it's time for him to respawn, we're going to use a different script to access this to say, is it time to respawn or no? So for now, that's good. Now 2/3 of bar left and 1/3 of bar left is exactly what it sounds like. This is going to determine if we have if we're down to 2/3 of our bar, then we want it to change color. So it'll turn to yellow at 2/3, and at 1/3 it'll go to the red. Now the formula that I designed for it is pretty simple. We're basically just dividing, which I rounded up, so it's a little bit more than 2/3 actually, and we divided that value by 100. We multiply it by the max player health, and this will give us the proper calculation for the filler amount for the image to show what we have. And it's the same thing for the 1/3 of bar. Now we're going to get into something new. This is actually how you save information. So this is a built-in Unity way. It's called player prefs, and we're going to set a float, and we're going to design this field to store our variable in called max player health. And we're actually using the max player HP variable to store in there to start it off. And that way, every time we start a new level, we're going to have this information in there. And let's just say that you finish the level and you have 50% health and you have 2 lives left. Well, we're going to want to store all that information so that when we start a new scene, we're going to have the exact amount of health at the beginning of the next level. So it's kind of like an Iron Man thing. Now if you want to start with full health every time, then all you have to do is, whenever you start a new level, go ahead and just reset these variables here into here. And I'll show you what I mean in a minute. So then we take the max player HP and we're going to get the float. So this is setting the value, this is how you save, and this is how you get what is inside of there. And we do the same thing for the player HP. We want to start off with the player not respawning, so unless he dies, we don't want this to be true. So we just started off as false. Now we're going to update the player UI non-stop. We always want it to be checking, and only time we want to respawn the player is if respawn player is true. So that's it for the update. Updating the player UI works exactly like it did for the enemy. except for we're just comparing, is there 2/3 bars? If player is greater than 2/3, then we want it to be green. And this is how we set the fill amount, the same way we did in the last video. That's what's going to control the image amount, what we're seeing displayed in the UI. And this is if we want it to turn yellow, and this is what will happen if we want it to turn red. And then we have our failsafe here, so if we're less than or equal to 0, we want to make sure that no image is showing, which it shouldn't be if the code is working right, but this is just a failsafe. Now how respawning the player works is we want to set the variable to false so it doesn't run this over and over again. We just want it to do it one time. We're going to get the player's transform position, and we want to make it equal that of the respawn position. So that's how we teleport him back to where he needs to go. And then we want to reset the player's health to whatever value the max player's health is, and that refills his bar, and that's pretty much how that works. Now for the player lives, it's pretty much the same thing, except for on this one we're going to be using system collections because of the IE numerator. And the other thing different is we're going to use scene management because when he hits 0 lives and 0 health, we are going to want him to go and move on to the death scene. Same thing with the image fills, and the same thing with the player's game object. We just need to be able to access them so that I'll show you how it works below. But when he dies, we don't want him to just instantly change scenes. I want to transition to where if you want to put a death animation in, you can do that, and I'll show you exactly where to do that. It's a piece of cake. Same concept for the static lives. We also want to know if the player is dead or not, and we're also going to save the current scene. So if we want to continue back to this scene, we need to store the integer, which is going to be one of these numbers here. So if we're on level 1, it will store the value number 2 in there. So when we go to continue, we will get that integer and it will take us back to this scene based on that integer. Then, max player lives, that's pretty common. Same thing with 2/3 and 1/3 a bar. And then we want to know if the player can die. This is just strictly for this script, so I made it private. Off the start, we're going to do the same thing about setting the float, but we're just creating a file for player lives here, and then we're going to make player lives equal that value. Same formula. Player's dead because he's obviously not dead if we're just starting, and he can't die if he just started, so we don't want that. Now instead of doing a death animation, what I did is I made the enemy disappear and I disconnected his circle collider, and that way the player's not detected, the enemy's not going to shoot at him anymore, and if he does, it's not going to hit him. So that's just something I did, and since I disable it upon death, I want to make sure that when we start the game to re-enable it, or else you may not be able to see the player. It'll just be kind of funny. I've had problems like that before, so that's why I do it that way. The UI life bar is the same concept with the exact same logic, so I don't really have to go over that. Player's dead equals true, then player has died, and we will go over how that goes. So, well, I'll let you at least take a peek at it, but it's the same code. Alright, so the player has died. We want to set that variable player is dead to false. We want to make can die true, and we want to save the current scene, and this is how you do that. We're going to get the scene manager, and we're going to get the active scene, and we want the build index, which is that integer I showed you in the build manager. Then we want to set the int of current scene, so this is us creating our save file, and we're going to save whatever integer is in current scene here. and we could take that to the next scene if we need to. We could take it anywhere because it's a save file. So if can die is true, then we want to start the death coroutine. And this is pretty simple. This is where you would do your death animation if you wanted to, or anything like that. First thing you want to do, no matter what, is set can die to false. And this is where this is my death animation. It just makes him disappear and makes his collider disappear. But you would put your death exploding particles, or maybe he spins and maybe he falls over and dies. Who knows? Whatever you're doing, this is where you would do that. However long that animation takes would probably determine how long you want to wait before moving to the death scene. But once that happens, you actually do move to the death scene, and we'll do that in the next video. So that pretty much covers everything in this video, and I hope that you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe. If you have any questions, I actually created a Facebook group so that if you have questions, you can ask them there and I will answer you. You can ask them here, I can answer you here, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. Whatever you want to do, whatever you feel is best help to you, that's what I'm here to do. Alright, I'll catch you in the next video, hopefully. Have a good one.